Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. So as I often do on these solo casts, I talk about things that I often see showing up with my clients because I get really curious about understanding people. And I get fascinated over the dynamics in which we stay stuck, which is why my whole thing is about journey forward, because to me, that is the ability to get unstuck from what's not working so you can move past it and live the fulfilling, authentic life that you are craving and want. Sometimes that's going to be about your own individual self and your own patterns and your own habits and your own mindsets. But for many of us, we get stuck in patterns in our relationships. And when we are feeling stuck in our relationship, it can affect so many aspects of our lives. It can affect our ability to focus and pay attention and be present. It can affect our ability to feel good about our sense of self or our self-worth. It can affect our ability to co-parent effectively if we've got kids with our partners. It can affect our ability to really feel loved, safe, and secure in our partnership. And there are so many instances in which couples that I work with, or even individuals in working on their relationship, have really good intentions, but often have unskillful execution. And as a result, our intentions are not always received in the manner in which we intend, and we keep missing the mark in connecting with our partners. So I'm going to talk about today some things that I see often occurring. So hopefully you can gain some insight into your own patterns and dynamics within your partnerships. So you can gain some wisdom to say to yourself, how can I show up in a different way? Because here's the thing. It's not necessarily try harder, it's try different. Because if we keep doing the same things we've always done, in the hopes for a different outcome, we're gonna stay stuck for a really long time. And then we're gonna create a narrative around that, either something to do with I'm not lovable, or this person might not be the right partner for me. Either of which can cause great distress in your own self-concept as well in your belief in the partnership. So let me start by saying, relationships are really, really hard. And even as a therapist, I am kind of sometimes laughing at the idea of it all. It's amazing that any of it even works. Because here we've got two individuals who have completely separate backgrounds, childhoods, cultural and social upbringings in which we've had implicit and explicit ways in which we show and express and communicate love. Perhaps we're from different cultures or religions. So that's all going to play a part into how different we are. And oftentimes we don't have the self-awareness to communicate any of these things. And we are under the misguided belief that love is enough, or if I'm with someone long enough, or if I love them hard enough, then perhaps I'll be able to read their minds for what they need, which is why I laugh to say it's amazing any of it works at all. Relationships are so hard, and it takes a great amount of awareness of your partner, self-awareness, compassion, curiosity, vulnerability, and the belief that growth and change is possible to get unstuck from the patterns that are likely repeating themselves and getting you nowhere. So if during this episode, as you're listening, you just feel like, oh man, is this ever gonna get better? Just know it's hard. And even sometimes just validating out loud to you and your partner to say, yeah, man, this is really hard right now. Even then, Acknowledging the disconnection that you're both experiencing becomes a point of connection. So you don't necessarily have to align for you to feel connected. You can use your disconnection to say, man, I'm feeling really disconnected. And your partner could say, yeah, me too. And we can be vulnerable in just naming that we're disconnected versus getting defensive, which is going to shut down the ability for vulnerability as well as connection, which will only keep the disconnection alive. So relationships are hard. That's the first universal truth that I really believe. Another universal truth about relationships, we all want to be seen, heard, and validated. Whether it's our romantic partners, whether it's our children, whether it's our friends or family members, every single one of us wants to be seen, heard, and validated. In absence of feeling seen, heard, and validated, generally one of two things happen. One, we shut down and we withdraw. Another option is we get louder, under the belief if I get louder, maybe then they'll hear me. Maybe then I'll be acknowledged. But shutting down and withdrawing, which could also be like stonewalling, is not going to be what leads toward connection, nor getting the need met to be seen, heard, and validated. Just as getting louder, getting angry, yelling will not be the thing to help you actually get seen, heard, and validated. It'll cause your partner likely to get defensive and then shut down. So here's the thing that I want you to understand. There is always an emotion driving a behavior. Now, I've talked about this concept in some of the podcast episodes that I recorded about parenting, right? You have a tantruming child. It's going to trigger the parents. The parents are going to react to the tantrum. They're going to try to give a consequence for it, which the child's never going to want to adhere to. So now it becomes a hierarchical battle of who's going to win. And meanwhile, we have failed to get curious about the emotion underneath the behavior. And until that emotion gets acknowledged, it's really hard to calm down the behavior. The same is true for adults. In partnership, there is always an emotion driving a behavior. And because when we get stuck, the behavior does not feel good, we tend to focus on the behavior, which can cause further disconnect, defensiveness, and disconnection. Actually, I said disconnect there twice. That causes defensiveness and disconnection. If we can pause, have the ability to self-regulate, you've heard me talk about this before as well. Regulate, then resolve, right? You need to calm down your own nervous system to quiet down that emotional brain so you can even access the tools to communicate effectively. This is why I think meditation is so powerful as a practice, because it gives us the wiring in our brain to remind us to slow down and breathe, because when we do, that emotional brain's going to settle, our tools will come back online. But when we can get curious about the emotion that's driving the behavior, even ask questions, and I'll give some examples of this, it can help our partner feel seen, heard, and validated. Now, here's the irony. If you can meet your partner's needs, you will have a much likelier chance of getting your needs met back in return. So if your partner is feeling insecure in the relationship and they name that, and you respond with the defensiveness and saying, I'm not doing anything to make you insecure, their need is not being met. They're not being acknowledged. They are likely going to feel more disconnected. And then you might be like, well, how come when I asked a question, I got snapped at? This is the reciprocal relationship of disconnection. Whereas if one person were to say, I'm feeling really insecure in the relationship, and the partner responded with, wow, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way. I'm sorry if I've done something to contribute to you feeling really insecure. I'm wondering what might make you feel more secure right now. If I were to say that to my partner when they say they're insecure, that might give me greater insight into what their needs are. It would show my partner, I'm vested in helping you alleviate this uncomfortable emotion. And if I truly don't feel like I've done anything wrong, I can still acknowledge their emotion. Because this is what happens. The partner who is on the receiving end feels defensive. I didn't do anything wrong. It's not about right or wrong. It's about acknowledging the emotion your partner is experiencing. You don't have to agree with it to acknowledge that for your partner, it's real. If they're feeling hurt, it's not up to you to decide whether or not it's a valid reason for them to be hurt. It's up to you to acknowledge they're feeling hurt, apologize if you've done something wrong, and if you truly feel like you've done nothing on your own actions to cause your partner pain, then get curious. Hey, I'm really confused. I hear what you're saying and I honor that you're feeling hurt, but I'm really not sure what I did. Could you help explain to me? Because just because we've been together with our partners for a long time does not mean we can read their minds. So a few more things that are really consistent in what I see working with couples is we tend to focus on the details of an argument. We tend to focus on the surface level, what happened. It becomes a tit for tat. It becomes a he said, she said. It becomes a vulnerability that's met with defensiveness. Whatever it is, we tend to focus on the details. And there have been times where I've had couples sit in front of me in my office, and I will let them focus on the details quite for some time, partly because I want to observe what are the details that continue to arise. But for me, what I'm really doing is I'm taking a diagnostic look to say, what are the patterns that are underlying these disconnections, these arguments, these challenges in this relationship? Because if I can get curious about the patterns that are repeating themselves, and I can speak to the pattern and then develop the tools and teach the client the tools to break the pattern, then the details won't matter as much because there's always going to be new details. So while the details matter and are important, what I'm really concerned about as a therapist is the pattern underlying. Because like I said, if I can increase awareness of the pattern in real time, in the moment, and recognize, oh, look, here goes our pattern again. This is really interesting. Let me then see how I can shift the pattern. All you have control over is you. I always say you only have control over two things ever, your breath and your response to what's arising. So if you recognize that every single time your partner expresses vulnerability, you get defensive, well, then let's just be mindful of your own response. Even if it's hard for you not to get defensive, one of my favorite things to say is make the implicit explicit. In absence of knowing what to say, I don't know what to say. So let's give this an example. So your partner comes to you with some vulnerability. You notice inside of you that you're starting to get defensive. And I say you notice it because thoughts, emotions, and sensations happen interchangeably. It's a sign of our nervous system being activated. So if you feel the tension arise in your body, if you feel the flooding of thoughts, if you feel the anger start to bubble, name that. Observe out loud to your partner and to yourself, wow, I'm noticing I was starting to get really defensive. Let me just take a second and pause and let me think about how I want to respond. Now, I don't know many couples who would actually do that in the middle of a trigger, but I implore you to practice. I guarantee if you broke the pattern of defensiveness when your partner calls you out on something, and I'll get to the partner's communication in a second, if you can control your defensiveness when your partner calls you out on something and simply name it. Now, we know this from neuroscience, that when we can name what we're experiencing, It quiets down the emotional brain, which is going to reduce our reactivity to it and give us back our access to our tools, our logic, reason, rationality, and communication, all which reside in a separate part of the brain than the emotions. So to just name, wow, I'm noticing I was really starting to just get defensive. And I know that if I were to get defensive right now, it's going to shut down my ability to really hear you. So let me just pause. Okay, you just told me you're feeling insecure in the relationship. Okay, what is it you need right now to feel more secure? Versus, I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you insecure? You see how the difference is there? So when you can recognize the patterns underlying the details in a dynamic, you can have great insight in how to alleviate the patterns that keep causing problems. And I've often said this, I would not be in the position I'm in my career if I did not believe that growth and change were possible. If I did not believe that you have the ability to develop new habits and new patterns. It takes awareness and it takes practice. And it's easier said than done, I know, and I know that it's possible. So here's the issue. If we don't resolve the patterns, and if we always stay stuck on the details, we are never going to fully get to resolution. And what happens when our pain points don't get resolved? Then they build up. And with the buildup of pain points, not only are we cultivating a narrative around this relationship or maybe my partner, but we are also building resentment. And resentment is a fast path to disconnection. So I just invite you to notice and look at the areas in your relationship in which things haven't been resolved. And now I also know that, studies say that about 2/3 of relationship issues can't be resolved. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So even if you agree to disagree, you can disagree on the details. But what I invite you to agree upon is validating your partner's pain. You don't have to necessarily believe it to be true of why they're feeling that way. Remember, emotions aren't logical, but we can do our best to be empathic and compassionate to the experience that they're feeling. So, a couple of things to review before I move on. Recognize that there is so much shit that gets in the way of connection. Relationships are hard. Everyone wants to feel seen, heard, and validated. The things that get in the way of connection is defensiveness, is shutting down our partner's vulnerability, is creating narratives around unresolved past issues. And there are things that we can do to help alleviate these patterns. So in my work this week with clients, I really recognized, and I wanted to share this with you guys because it's kind of a working model that I'm thinking about. But as I really reflected on the patterns that I see couples get stuck in, I found a couple of consistent themes that I'm curious for you to be sitting with in your own relationships to see if whenever you are stuck, whenever you're feeling disconnected, whenever there's a trigger, if perhaps it is one of these 4 different areas. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't given this framework an immense amount of thought. However, when I've applied it to my own relationship and in looking at all the work that I do with couples, I think it's going to be pretty accurate. Of course, there's no scientific backing for this theory. This is really an observational analysis of identifying over the years patterns that couples get stuck in. Because remember, there's always going to be new details. And if we stay stuck on the details, we stay stuck on the surface. And I'm really interested into getting beneath the surface, going to that emotion that's driving the behavior, and really figuring out how can we step towards one another in greater connection. Because love is not enough. We need actual skills to build healthy relationships. Okay, so here are the 4 categories of patterns that I believe most stuck in places in relationships get caught in. The first one I'm going to name is that whatever the detail that is arising in the moment is triggering a past trauma. Now, when I say the word trauma, I want to be clear that trauma does not necessarily mean a life-threatening instance or situation. That trauma, whether we're talking big capital T trauma or little lowercase t trauma, what I mean is a sustained sense of not feeling safe and feeling dysregulated. Of course, we can have big capital T traumas, those big traumatic events that could perhaps be life-threatening, but that have caused emotional scars. But science backs up that little t traumas, the paper cuts in relationship, the emotional neglect, the gaslighting, the verbal abuse, which I'm saying some of these could be big T traumas as well. That the science behind this says enough lower T traumas, these little traumas, these paper cuts over time end up having the same effects as a big capital T trauma. So when I go back to what is a pattern in which relationships get stuck, I believe we get triggered from previous pain points. Now, those pain points might have to do with you and your partner from a previous argument or a transgression or a paper cut from the past. Or those pain points could have nothing to do with your partner. They just simply activated something inside of you from your past. Could be from a previous relationship, could be from your childhood. Now, it takes great awareness to recognize what is the pain point, what is the trigger that is being activated in this moment with my partner. Now, my fiance, John, and I, he's a psychologist. He does this work with men as well. So we are both in the mental health field. We have the awareness in the moment to get curious and ask each other, is this triggering something from us in our past? Or does this have to do with your ex? Or does this perhaps have to do with your childhood? And oftentimes it's some previous trigger from so long ago that embedded a narrative inside of our mind that we hold on to as part of our identity. Whether it's the narrative of I'm not good enough, or whether it's the narrative of I'm not lovable, or I have a fear of abandonment. And when we unknowingly act from that place of a previous pain point, then we're not fully present with our partner. So I know I'm giving a lot of detail around this, but I really want to help you guys hear and see how past traumas can get activated even when your partner did not mean to activate them. That is coming from a place of your own sensitivity. There's nothing wrong with that. But naming that in the moment can help you regulate your brain as well as connect with your partner right here and now. So it takes a lot of self-awareness to recognize, well, you just said this, and what came up for me was something from, something my dad used to say to me, or my mom used to say to me, or I had an ex who used to tell me this, and I really went back to that place. And it made it really hard for me to actually hear what you said. Okay, so moving on. So the first area is a pattern of disconnection in present moment with your partner. Could be that it triggered a previous trauma. Here's number 2, and it's a big one, is that the reason you're getting stuck in your relationship is because you and your partner in this moment have a difference in values. Now, values are huge in understanding how we live our lives and what's important to us. And there's a couple of different ways that I've talked about previously on the podcast, but a couple of different ways that I like to help you uncover your values. One is through noticing what's missing, your voids. Another one is looking at what's violated. And so if, let's say, you have a value of a peaceful home environment, okay, you feel like you can be most present, you can focus, you can pay attention, you can be creative, whatever it is when your house is peaceful and your partner comes in and it starts yelling, it's violating the value of a peaceful home environment. Okay, so, but maybe your partner's like, but I grew up in a house that people yelled. That's not a big deal to me, right? It's a difference in values. And so when you can recognize, and here's a specific example where a lot of couples get stuck in their values differences, is there are different definitions of how to spend time together or what to do with our time. Now, perhaps one person in the relationship really values independence, or maybe places a really high value on their friendships, their same-sex friendships. Maybe they have some hobbies that they really feel good when they are able to enact, whether it's exercise or a sport. And let's say the other partner does not share the same value of independence, that their highest value is connection within the relationship. So when the person who has a high value of independence wants to enact something, the person who places a higher value and maybe does not value independence might get really triggered and get butthurt. Now, that's not to say the person who values their own independence does not also value connection in their relationship. And this is the challenge. It becomes a competing value. Both are important. But if I don't value independence at all, I'm going to have a really hard time supporting you in your independence. It's going to make me get triggered. It's going to make me feel hurt. I'm not going to feel important. And I'm going to feel abandoned every time you go enact independence. Now, that would be focusing on the detail. To peel back the layers and to understand the pattern would be to notice, oh, look at that. Our values around how we spend our time are a little bit different. How can we respect each other's values, even if we don't share the exact same ones? There's plenty of values that my partner and I don't share, and there's plenty of values that we do share. So the ones that we don't share, it's not a matter of convincing it or who's right or who's wrong. It's a matter of recognizing, oh, we're talking about a values difference here. But because I love you, I want to respect your value, and I'll recognize to not take it personally. So I have a previous episode talking about values if you want to hear going deeper into that. But this is an area in which so many couples get stuck. Let's say one person has a value of connection throughout the day, and the other person's value is when I'm at work and I can't deviate my attention. So no one's wrong. But if the person who values connecting throughout the day is looking for texts every 3 hours and they're not getting that, that might get interpreted as you don't love me as much as I love you. Or conversely, the person who really values focus and attention during their workday might get pissed at their partner. You keep bugging me all day. You keep checking up on me. Why can't you just let me focus and do my work? So you can see that what comes out as character attacks are simply reflections of a difference in values. And if you can have the self-awareness to recognize the pattern underneath the details, you will decrease defensiveness and you're going to increase connection. Okay, third area I see a lot of patterns emerging for difficulty in couples is simply communication patterns. I've talked before in previous episodes about the pattern of nonviolent communication, and I'm going to go back to that because nonviolent communication is a framework in which you start off by unapologetically naming what you're observing and how it makes you feel. You're using I statements, you're owning it, you're neutral in your language, because as soon as you say to your partner, you didn't do this or you're doing this, whether or not they are or aren't, they're going to get defensive because it's going to put them on the automatic defense. Now, if someone were to say, you're not loving me right now, versus I'm feeling really insecure in this relationship, two different ways of communicating. Part of the problem with communication is that sometimes even when we are really effective in our communication, it doesn't always get received in the manner in which we intend. And that takes a lot of awareness to be able to know your partner well enough to say, I really want to share something and I'm not quite sure how to best say it so you can best hear it. So it might take some time offline. And what I mean by offline is not in the moment of the trigger or disconnect, for you and your partner to sit down, understand your different styles and communication, and give each other some scripts so you can learn, how does your partner need to hear things? Because let's say one partner is super sensitive and the other partner is not. The super sensitive partner may misinterpret their partner's language as insensitive and blunt, because that's not what they would need to hear. But if that person could have insight into, hey, I'm highly sensitive, and when I hear you say this, here's how it makes me feel. So let's figure out some different ways for you to say this to me. So it might be worthwhile, not might, it will be worthwhile for you to sit down with your partner and figure out, hey, when I have got something to say that I'm either feeling really vulnerable or angry about or insecure about, how can I best say that so you can best hear it? Now, of course, I'm going to go to the John Gottman tool of a Softman startup, which is plant the seed for that conversation. Don't just dump it on your partner at a time that they may not really be able to hear it, like if they just walked in the door. So you want to be mindful of timing. But I do believe so much of disconnect comes from poor communication. And as I've said in the past, it's not just the words, it's the tone of voice, it's the volume, and it's the body language alongside the actual words itself. Now, here's a caveat. Sometimes communicating in a new, more vulnerable way might be really challenging for someone. And so if it's hard, I invite you again to make the implicit explicit and just name it and literally say your intention. So in case it's not the exact right tone of voice, at least you can show your partner, I'm trying. And if they can be softened to hear that your intention is a pure intention, even if it's not being executed to your degree of satisfaction, at least it's a stepping stone, and acknowledge that with compassion and acceptance and love. So there'll be times where, if maybe I'm coming out of a disconnect with my partner and I'm trying to make a repair attempt to step towards connection, and that repair attempt isn't received, I might literally say out loud, hey, Liv, this is me making a repair attempt. Can you see that this is what I'm trying to do right now? So that way, exactly what I'm intending can be communicated, even if the communication itself is not being received. So the fourth thing that I want to say is, as a pattern for where couples get disconnected, rather than just focusing on the detail, is either going to be a lack of awareness or just making assumptions. Well, I really love this, so I'm going to assume my partner loves this too, or I don't need this, so I'm going to assume my partner doesn't need this. Or just simply a lack of awareness to even recognize there's an issue arising. So I'm curious, sit with these 4 different areas, look at the places in your relationships where you get stuck, and see if it's one of these 4 things that's arising. Because again, you can stay focused on the details, which will keep you on the surface, which will keep you often disconnected because you don't have the skills to develop the new patterns. Or see if you can take a step back, go beneath the surface, peel back the layers, and get curious of what pattern is actually emerging here. I want to give an example of a very typical pattern. And when I help explain this to clients, they almost laugh like, oh my God, are you in my home? Are you witnessing what's happening? So a very typical pattern, and this could actually highlight a lot of these 4 different areas that I just named. Oftentimes, there is the person in the relationship, when there becomes conflict, they want to create some space and they distance. And by distance mean when they feel overwhelmed, when they feel their nervous system activated and they get triggered and they start to shut down, they begin to pull back. And oftentimes they'll pull back in a way to help regulate themselves. So that way they can collect their thoughts. They can understand what's going on with them. Perhaps it's in an effort to calm themselves down so they don't say something they don't mean. Perhaps they just need some space. So the distancer will start to step back. Now, oftentimes, they have a person in the relationship. struggles with that. When their partner becomes a little bit more distant and pulls back, and they become a pursuer, and they begin to step towards their partner. And they're stepping towards their partner because they're saying, wait, I need connection to resolve this issue. And when you step away, I feel more disconnected, and I'm stepping towards you so we can connect. And that pursuer begins to feel abandoned when the distancer takes their time. Now, if we look at these 4 different areas, the first one I said was trauma, previous traumas being triggered. So perhaps what each person's trauma looks like in this moment is the distancer is pulling back because they have a narrative from a previous pain point in which they've been told, you're not good enough. And maybe something in the disconnection of the moment that caused the trigger in that moment in the relationship activated this old or maybe current narrative of I'm not good enough. And they're wanting to step away from what feels like pain in connection. And simultaneously, that stepping away could activate the other partner's narrative or trauma of I'm abandoned right now. So both of those trauma pain points are being activated in that distancer pursuer dynamic. It also could be highlighting a values difference. The distancer is valuing some alone time for healing, where the pursuer might value connection time for healing. No one's right, no one's wrong. They're different values, different needs. So if we can honor that, if we can honor it as a values difference and an ability to say, hey, I see actually where each of our narratives from our traumas in the past have been activated. And I recognize we've got different patterns for regulation. You need alone time, I need connection. How can we both get both of our needs met? For the person who needs their space, I would invite you to let your partner know you're coming back. Just telling them, hey, I need 20 minutes, I need an hour, and then I can have an easier time connecting, will make the person whose narrative is abandonment feel validated in their need for connection, for healing and resolution. If in that moment it becomes a communication issue, make the implicit explicit rather than just yelling at each other, why do you always do this? I can't believe you're doing this again. Just simply name what you're actually feeling. Wow, it's really hard when I try to connect and you step away. And I'm wondering what we can both do that will meet both of our needs. Communication challenges are always present because we often aren't taught how to do this. And, this might highlight just simply a lack of awareness or an assumption that, hey, I know, I need to step forwards during disconnection. So I'm going to assume that my partner needs that too. So in absence of awareness, we tend to make assumptions, and loving someone is not reading their mind. So how do we manage getting through all of this? Well, start off with curiosity. As I've said many times in the past, curiosity and compassion can get you so far. Help me understand, hey, this is really hard right now. Again, like I said in the beginning, connect through the disconnect. Yeah, we're both really struggling right now, aren't we? Be curious about the interpretation of your words. Hey, love, I said, I'm really needing some space. What was it you heard? Did you hear that in the way that I intended? Or what did you hear when I said that? So you can clarify, is what you're saying being received in the intention in which you intended? Own your own emotion. Be really careful to own your emotion versus attacking on behavior of your partner, or even worse, setting themselves up for failure. If you were to ask a question to your partner you don't want to know the answer to because you are thinking if you just ask this question, it can alleviate you having to name your emotion, that's going to help keep you stuck. So an example of, do you love me versus I'm feeling insecure. Own the emotion. I'm feeling insecure. And when I feel insecure, I don't feel very loved. Can you please show me that you love me? And I just said the next thing, which was name the need. Don't be afraid to ask your partner for exactly what you need because they cannot read your mind. And likely because of your different pasts, because of your upbringing, you are going to have different ways of navigating pain and disconnect. And because we love each other, is not enough to read each other's minds for what we need. And even worse, our needs are going to change over time. And unless we validate that and communicate it, or validate it to ourselves and then communicate it to our partner, they may not always know where we're at. So don't feel like that having to name it, even multiple times, is a sign that your partner doesn't get you. Look at it as, let me give my partner all the information I can about myself so they can best understand me and ideally see, hear, and validate me. Because think of it. How often do you feel like you don't know yourself? You don't know what you need. You don't know what you feel. You don't know why you're triggered. You don't understand the emotion. You can't even communicate to yourself in your own mind in a way that's kind and considerate, because we all have a pretty loud inner critic. So if we're not able to do that for ourselves, then how is our partner able to do it for us? So as I always come back to, it comes back down to awareness. You can't change what you're not aware of. So I hope that you guys found this helpful, but I really believe that these 4 different areas highlight the patterns of disconnection in relationship. And to just go over them one more time, the 4 areas I see it as are past traumas being triggered, values differences, communication challenges, or lack of awareness and making assumptions. And if you look at where you and your partner most get stuck, I'm going to put money that it's 90% going to be one of those 4 things. I hope that you found this podcast helpful. I hope I explained it clearly out loud as it's been in my own mind, since I'm just kind of formulating these 4 areas as universal patterns. Again, my own observational analysis of working with couples for years, even working with individuals who are in partnership, highlight these patterns. If this podcast resonated with you, I would love a review, a rating, so we can be able to spread the word and help more people journey forward to living their best, most fulfilling and authentic lives. Thanks so much for tuning in.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.